participants that are coming in, welcome. We're happy to see each and every one of you. And we're going to start promptly at 10 o'clock. So you have 3 minutes. That's all you have to wait, just 3 minutes. And we're going to get started. So here you see on the screen what we're doing today. It's a virtual race retreat. And we're here to work. We're going to work through learning to talk more about race, talking, intervening, all the ways that we need to be able to have our voices heard as we go through this period of opening up ourselves about the white supremacist underpinning of our society and for much of the world. So thank you. That's what we're going to do today. We're going to shine a spotlight on white supremacy. So I'm just answering, Lou is saying that he and his friends didn't get it. So I asked him to send the link to them so that they can join. Okay. Somebody want to answer that? How do you add, well, how do you consider yourself when people talk to you? Did she send this to me or did she send it to everybody? Well,
I believe just you.
Okay, just parentheses. How did, when you think of yourself, do you think of yourself as she? When people refer to you, do they say her? Do they refer to you as what? This is awareness of gender fluidity, 2020. So, so here we are. We are joining, people are joining now, the Sitting in the Fire virtual race retreat. And while we're joining, I want to thank you, Heather. So while we're joining, we can actually see people and it's great. We're going to start right away. People for the next 15 minutes will be able to join, but I want to talk about a little bit about how we get here to this moment. I'm speaking now on behalf of, for myself and the co-host of my Let's Talk About Race radio show, Farrell Saunders. Farrell, can you just wave so we can see you?
Hello, everyone.
There's Farrell. And so about, and let's also talk about Heather McCormick. Heather, we are doing this together, Farrell and I, and we have this radio show, and it's called Let's Talk About Race. And we joined with the Somerville Media Center 3 years ago and had an opportunity to begin a radio show. So we couldn't think of a better title of the radio show than Let's Talk About Race. And the purpose of that was, we all know it's difficult in some sectors, not every sector. White people have a hard time, some of them, a lot of them, talking about race, especially white people who find themselves isolated in all white spaces. And so, and I talked to a French woman recently, and she said, I asked her to talk about race, and she said, we can't do that because in France it's considered impolite. It's rude to talk about race. And I thought about it and I said, well, that's the reason we keep white supremacy in place, because we get it into our minds that we can't talk about it. It's rude, it's impolite. So who knows that it's spread all out. And so the forces that benefit by, lots of people benefit, but the ones who really benefit by white supremacy, they want to keep it hidden and they deny it. So we'll go more into that later, just opening up, giving a little space for people to join us here today. And so this is an event that's the third in a series. We started with panel discussions when we were meeting in person. We had panel discussions, and they were situated at the Somerville Media Center in Union Square in Somerville, Massachusetts. But for these events, we've always been fortunate to have some support for that. There's been a lot of in-kind support and a lot of volunteer putting in time that we've all done. But we've had some support from the Somerville Arts Council and for this event as well. So welcome to everyone. So I've introduced myself. I think my name is Diane Wong. We're going to ask everybody a lot today to self-identify racially. So racially, I self-identify as a Black woman with multiracial lineage. And Pharaoh, can you speak a little bit about yourself? Maybe the things that motivate you, why you are passionate about ending white supremacy. And can you identify yourself for everybody? Pharaoh, my co-host, and
Sure.
the co-host of this show, of this program.
Yeah, my name is Pharaoh Saunders. I identify racially as Black. I think that that's a really important topic to, I would say that I have a particularly vested interest in ending white supremacy, but just in general, the point of bringing attention to this sort of thing is just for the reasons you said, because these are often topics that not just, you brought up European society, but definitely I'd also say American society. There's just topics that are considered one of the things that are rude to talk about, this, money, and politics, though I guess some of those things may change. But the idea is that we've wanted to make a space to be able to, speak about these things on an open and communicative level. So, yeah, I particularly always like to factor in long-term history into how these things are shaped and formed. That's always been my specific interest in these topics. But yeah, that's definitely why I think that this is so important.
Thank you, Pharaoh. We also are joined, I mentioned Heather and the Somerville Media Center, and I talk about the Somerville Arts Council because it's really important that we support financially these efforts. Without financial support, we couldn't do this. Without people being willing to donate their time and effort. And so speaking of that, let me just point out that there are 14 skilled and trained facilitators who have willingly joined this effort. So if can you just wave your hand or something? You're the facilitators. We sent out bios of the facilitators, and so you know who they are, and You'll find out today because they will be facilitating the small groups. So I'm watching the time. It's 10:07. We have some people have joined. Some people will join in the next 8 minutes or else they'll be locked out. So let's get started. And so you can tell by my voice that I'm starting to slow down. And even if when we're doing important, passionate efforts, we have to, for each of us, for ourselves, we have to back up. We have to remember to breathe. We have to take deep breaths like I just did. And we take those deep breaths because it creates some space inside of us. It also creates an opportunity. We're all connected here with the universe, with the source of all creation, believe that or not. And so by taking a deep breath, stepping back, we allow some guidance, some wisdom to seep in. So let's everybody just start. Let's take a deep breath in. Expand your chest. Hold it. And now open your mouth and audibly exhale. Relax your shoulders as you exhale. Audible exhales release tension and stress from inside the body. So even as we go throughout our lives, take time for yourself. If you don't take time for yourself, nobody else can. So take another deep breath in. Let this breath seep into your shoulders, up into your head, down into your legs. Relax as you inhale. Hold it. Open your mouth. Audibly exhale. Release. Release. Take one more deep breath in. And as we release, just relax, especially through your face and your shoulders. Take one more deep breath in. Open your mouth. Just imagine all the tension in your life is just coming out. You can do that. You have the power to release oppression within you, the tension, the day-to-day, the years, the life of pressure. So now we're going to do some meditation, a few minutes. And we are starting to relax. And just start to notice the outside sounds. Notice the outside sounds. Relax face, relax shoulders. Notice outside sounds. Don't identify the sound. Just notice it. Sound. And now bring in the sounds inside the room that you're in. Bring the sounds closer in around you. And now get the sense of the breath as you inhale, moving into your body. Feel it. Bring your awareness inside. Feel it. The breath coming in, shooting down your arms and legs. And in the breath is life force. So all you have to do is when you inhale, just hold your consciousness. If you're working on like chest, heart, lungs, leg, hold your awareness at the injury, at the stress, the tension. Hold it there and take a deep breath in. Breath follows awareness. And as you exhale, you can intend to release tension. So now finish with the relaxing here, your face, your eyes, your ears, your nose, your mouth. Relax. The organs are in your face, the skin on your face. Relax. Start to relax down through your shoulders and your arms, down through your chest. Just relax. Relax your hips, your legs, knees, kneecaps. Take a deep breath in and bring life force, healing life force into your kneecaps. And exhale, ah. And then Crystal mentioned feet. So next breath in, take it all the way down your body into your feet. Feel your feet. Spread that life force into your feet and exhale, ah, all the tension. Ah, now we're relaxed in our body. Bring your awareness to your middle of your forehead. Ah, that's known in yoga, that's your third eye. We're going to tap into your intuition, your inner sight, and just see a blank screen there. Now onto that blank screen, see yourself, and see yourself walking down a pleasant street, traffic, and you're visiting in a place where you've wanted to visit, you don't know, but it seems nice. You came last night, stayed at an Airbnb, and now you're walking down the street, you pass people, and for the most part, you're feeling so comfortable. Feels like you just smile at all the people, and then you continue walking down the street and you notice it. You haven't noticed before, but now you notice 3 Black young men, and they're walking toward you. And so now start to notice, as soon as you feel that I said a Black young man, what feelings started to arise in your body? What thoughts came up? What thoughts just popped in? And as you walk and you get closer, you hear them, and they're laughing, and they're moving around, and notice that. And you notice that, and so what do you do? How do you feel? How do you take in the presence of Black young men? So you get beyond that, and you're walking, and you turn down the street. Now you're here for the day, and now it's starting to be dusk, and you turn down the street. As you turn down the street, and you start to hear the sounds of music. But this music, you notice it has a distinct Latin beat. It's got a Latin beat to it. You think it's Latin. Maybe you're not familiar, maybe not, but you feel that. So how do you feel when you hear the sounds of Latin beat? Spanish, Hispanic, what comes into your mind? And you notice this. And as you walk down the street, you look at people and you see that you hear the language of Spanish. How does it feel in your body as you're walking down the street? And now you're starting to notice that you're seeing a lot of Black people on the street. You're unfamiliar with this street. So now you're seeing not just 1 or 2, but you notice that you're in an area. What does it feel like when you're walking down the street in your body? How do you feel? And now you see, another man, a Black man coming to you, and he's tall, he's a Black man, he's muscular, and he's walking toward you, and you look and you get his eye. What do you see? How do you feel when you catch the eye of a Black man, a muscular Black man? If that means anything to you, feel it in your body. What are your thoughts? And so you're walking down the street. And if you're a woman, or just whoever you are, put yourself in a woman's body. And now she's walking toward this Black man, and she's looking at him. How does it feel to the woman that you're in, the skin that you're in right now. And so let that go. Let all of that go and just be aware. Just be aware. So start to come back into the room that you're in, and just be aware for today. It's not thinking, although we're going to have some things to think about. Try to focus your awareness on feeling. This is hearts and minds. We are here to explore our own hearts and minds. We've been kept away from thinking and feeling into race. Today we're going to feel ourselves. How do we feel about race? What thoughts pop up? What's going on in your body? So as we come out of that, I'm going to start to call on Heather. And Heather, can you give us some guidance today on just the basic things of what people can expect, how you can participate in a way that that gives some space for everybody, everybody. That's what we want. So Heather.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for everyone being here. So we just want to go over the agenda for today, as well as some basic ground rules. This is the plan of today. So we have some introductions this morning and some stage setting by Diane and Pharaoh, and that meditation that we just participated in. We'll have our first breakout session this morning, where we'll be getting into dialogue groups to talk about race and to talk about the themes of this morning. We'll have time for a break in the middle of the day for lunch, and then we'll return for another breakout session with the same group and the same facilitator to practice role plays. And then we'll have an opportunity to come back together as a group to process and make commitments to future action. So in terms of the norms, this was a collaborative effort by all the facilitators. Oh my God. I love that.
Yeah.
Love Zoom. Great. Our technology norms. So everybody is muted, auto muted in our large group, and we're going to ask that you don't unmute yourself. We have over 80 people in this group until you're in your breakout groups, and then we'll ask you to unmute and to participate. You can add your questions or comments or reactions in the chat. And you can also individually reach out to facilitators, anyone with a co-host next to their name. You can individually reach out to us if you have a question. I mentioned this in the chat, but Diane and Pharaoh, and this part of the presentation, this morning part, this first hour, is going to be filmed, but nobody else is being filmed besides the active speaker. Norms for discussion and dialogue. So as I mentioned, we have 2 breakout sessions today, each of which are an hour with a group of 10 or less people. So that's going to be an opportunity to dig deep, and we really want to take advantage of that opportunity today. Diane just modeled for us self-awareness. So paying attention to your bodily reactions, paying attention to how you feel, paying attention to where the tension is and lives in your body. If you're holding your breath, if you're clenching your fist, if you feel tightness in your chest, note those things, because that could be an indication of something that we can learn from. And we're going to lean into that discomfort today. Today is not necessarily going to feel comfortable all the time, and that is where the growth is. So we're going to create a brave space, a community space where we respect each other and we honor each other, but we're also going to ask that people take risks and be authentic and be vulnerable and be able to admit some hard truths and to talk about them. Because as Diane mentioned, we need to unearth them in order to change them. And uncomfortability does not mean that you're unsafe. It might feel unsafe, it might feel scary, but it does not mean that we are going to be unsafe, because we're holding each other in community today. If there is harm, so you can address harm. If you feel offended or if you feel targeted, you can certainly say that you feel that way, and you can express that feeling. But we do ask that you speak from your truth. So you speak from your own personal experience, use I statements, and, you know, we don't want to use blanket statements or overgeneralizations, and certainly not for groups that we don't belong to. So we want to be thoughtful about that. The next thing here is, because we're asking you to be so vulnerable and asking people to take risks today, we also want to make sure that we create an environment that's conducive to that. So instead of calling people out in the sense of excluding them, telling them that they're wrong, telling them that they're bad for thinking the things that they do, we want to try to have, we want to try to invite a calling in, which initiates conversation, initiates growth, believes that people can grow, and invites people to grow rather than shutting them down. Because it's very easy to shut out the people that we think are problems, but then we're not getting to the problem, right? So the last thing here is take space and make space in the conversation. So be aware of how much or how little you are talking. We don't want people to monopolize the conversation, but especially in the small groups, silence is not an option. We do not want people to stay silent. That might mean fumbling through something that you haven't fully thought out, and that's okay. That's okay. We're not here to be right. We're here to end racism. We're here to talk about white supremacy. So, and this just goes to speaking to identity, you know, depending on who you are, the brave thing may be to listen or to speak up. So commit to knowing and challenging yourself. And the last thing is, please donate to make more work like this possible. So everybody in here should have gotten a link to Diane's GoFundMe, and it's really important that we continue to support Diane and support Pharaoh in these projects moving forward, so that this is only the first in many more. All right. And I think it's back to you, Diane.
One has to unmute oneself. Okay. Thank you, Heather. And everybody feel comfortable. We're not here by happenstance. We are all here for a reason. And we're here at this time on earth to help all of us go through this transition phase that we're in. So we're in the time of hearts and minds. Hearts and minds. So if anybody is old enough to remember, I can remember, all of the activities of the 1960s. And you remember that in 1964, the Civil Rights Act of 1964, I remember it at the time, because one of the things, the memorable things for me was when they said, okay, we're going to change the laws. We're going to work on changing behaviors, but we can't change hearts and minds. So we're not going to try to do that. And so I guess that's just the way of the universe, because here today, it has become clear to many people, not only in the United States, but all throughout the world, that and they're speaking up and they're saying hearts and minds must change. And in particular, we're talking today about anti-Black racism. There's, I mean, certainly there are more groups, but it's at the core of hundreds of years of racial oppression and violence, anti-Black racism. And it's in us, it's in our DNA. And so how do we deal with that? We've got to root it out, because we must change. Just like silence is not an option, change is not an option. we must change. We will change. And so you're here today to get some skills to look into yourself to see what might you do for yourself. The battle of hearts and minds. And so the thing that I can remember, I remember so clearly, and I think of it all the time, and I'm not much of a music person. My people are music people. They listen to me music all the time, but there are a few people, there's a little bit of music that resonates down to my soul or in my soul or around my, wherever, however my soul is situated. And you'll recognize the words until, this is it. This is where we are right now. Until the philosophy that holds one race superior and the other inferior is finally and permanently discredited and abandoned, everywhere is war. Yes, as Catherine put in the chat, 1976, and it is as applicable as ever. And what I like about watching Bob Marley, I'm glad we were able to do the video and not just the sound. Sound is great, but if we watched his face, I mean, it's the emotion and the feeling in his face. He was feeling it. He was singing it from his soul. And that's what I'm calling on everybody today. Feel it. Whatever it is that strikes you, feel it in your soul. So, Heather, the next, can we have what is white supremacy? Yes. Okay, so we're talking today about white supremacy. And if you notice, like I notice, there is a bursting onto the scene. It's like we opened up and we pulled out of the depths of us where we really are. Racism, those are the progeny. They're the result, but of white supremacy. And so now we're going to go deep down into the platform upon which all of our systems, our healthcare, our health, our finances, all the wealth, the housing, everything that we have, certainly in the United States, and I'll just say throughout the Western world. This is Western civilization is built on a foundation of white supremacy, and it is still here today. And so we're going to have to name it, call it, bring it up, look at it, dissect it, and then dismantle it. But first we have to see it. So white supremacy is an historically based, institutionally perpetuated system of exploitation and oppression of continents, nations, and people of color by white people and nations of the European continent for the purpose of maintaining and defending a system of wealth, power, and privilege. That's what it is. That's what we're talking about today. Put it into your vocabulary. White supremacy. So now, let's look at the origins of white supremacy. And Pharaoh, my partner here in this journey, will talk about it and guide us through what are the origins, Pharaoh, of white supremacy.
So it's really important to understand exactly where all of these things are coming from. And as many people have stated already, how you've stated, these are things that have been, fundamentally rooted in all aspects of living from incredibly early on. So it can be difficult to sometimes place exactly where these origins might have taken their deepest and earliest roots from. So, like you can see, we're talking about how it's rooted in a history of economic, cultural, and religious, as well as military hegemony. So the idea of this is that it is a sense of superiority in those fields first and foremost. And you can find examples of those, whether it be as simple as military dominance, one group's ability to conquer and maintain its control over others through force of arms is military hegemony. Religious hegemony, which is a group's ability to convert either through incredible sense of persuasion or often by force other groups into their own ways of religious belief. Cultural hegemony, which is the idea of supplanting in other individuals' cultures with your own, forcing them to speak your language, forcing them to wear your attire, and seeing your aspects in those fields as the right way and the only way to move forward. Economic hegemony, the control of wealth, the control of the travel and hoarding of resources. These are where these things are born from. But a really important aspect that often gets lost is the comparison between the innate nature of these things, or who you are, versus circumstance, and an alteration of variant factors that happen to lead to where something is. The concept of white supremacy stems from hegemony in all of those fields: military, religious, cultural, and economic. But how hegemony in those fields was formed is an aspect of circumstance, an aspect of European nations gaining footholds in those fields, allowing them to perpetuate their dominance over others in those regards. It has nothing to do with the inherent superiority of race. However, after centuries of living in such a position of military power over others, religious dominance, converting others to your own faith, cultural dominance, getting others to speak your language, and controlling their wealth, it becomes ingrained in individuals that these things are the way they are. These things happen to continue to persist as the way they are because it's inherent to the white race to have these things over others. And that's a really dangerous line of thinking. Those things historically happened. Their European countries were able to dominate others through force of arms and control of resources. But after enough time, it became ingrained that these things simply were because of a matter of blood and because of a matter of science rather than circumstance. And it hasn't been that long. When you look at the history of all of these things, it can be traced to as early as the mid 1400s as to when Europe even began to start having this place of power over the rest of the world. So that's when you begin to look into alternative hegemonies, because European hegemony can be traced to the beginnings of the colonization of the Americas. Prior to European hegemony, you can find, strong example of the most important hegemony, I would say, of a collective world, trade-based society would be the Islamic hegemony and the control of resources that was founded throughout the Middle East and the Islamic world. The propagation of Arabic as a language spoken far outside of the small region of the world where it originated, similarly to the European languages. The use of Arabic as a written language and the number system, which we still use in the modern day, being perpetuated throughout much of the modern world. Those are examples of cultural and religious hegemonies that have existed prior to the current age of European hegemony that we live in right now.
Farrell, could you go a little slower? People are asking. Everyone's not an English speaker.
I'm so sorry. Yeah, I can go slower.
And let me ask you this question while you're doing that, because we talked about this yesterday, Farrell and I. And so can you talk about, we talked about the state of the Middle East and we compared that with the Roman Empire at the time of the fall of the Roman Empire. And so can you talk about how things can change? You can be on top of the world and then everything in your world is crumbled.
Exactly. That's exactly the point. It's circumstance. You know, nothing is the way it is because it's inherent. It's all circumstance, probability, and those things are subject to change like anything else. So I've heard said before in the modern day, often people from Western backgrounds speaking to, referring to many groups, but specifically in reference to the ones we were just talking about, and calling them, you know, things like savages and whatnot. And it's completely baseless to compare how, in the long lens of history, not that long ago, things were completely different. Every issue that anyone could trace or look into of depth in the Middle East, and as well as any region that has political instability in the modern world right now, you can find in Europe not that long ago. It's all circumstance. Everything can change. Everything can change for the worse or the better.
Okay. So I've always thought that in the United States, we just see things in such short terms. And I think there's a reason for that. I think we don't want, when I say we, I include everybody. Not that everybody feels exactly the same way, but it's enough of a we to hold the culture in a certain place. So we don't like, if it happened 10 years ago, like look at affirmative action, although affirmative action largely benefited white women, not Black people. Although the civil rights movement, if you watch Eyes on the Prize, you can see Black people, that's in the 60s. Now we're in 2020. It's really interesting to see just a multi-racial, multi-ethnic movement that is all over the world, and I'm delighted. But you see with Black leadership, and I think that's the genius of Black Lives Matter, to have the capacity to open up and to bring in and to allow and to make space for everybody, but understanding that this is a time for Black leadership, and it's a time for white people to join and to learn and to sit back. So here I want to talk a little bit now about what Farrell just talked about, the beginnings. We're talking, we could go on and on and on. Fall of the Roman Empire, the rise of the Islamic whole big takeover, the Ottoman Empire, and now the European empires on the down slope here, but we're still in white supremacy. So let's talk about now, how did we really get what we're talking about today is hearts and minds. And so how do we sink the feeling of white supremacy into the hearts and minds? Well, one thing we did was we codified it. And so let's look back to 1857. 1857, now we had the Supreme Court. And there was a case that came before the Supreme Court of a Black man in a Black family. He brought forth various reasons that he should be free. He was enslaved in some parts of the country and not, and so the Supreme Court looked at this. And so that was the Dred Scott case. Out of that case came a single thing that has imprinted itself in our cells, in our brain, to where we believe it. And so what did he say? He said, this is his quote that comes out of that: a Black man has no rights that a white man is bound to respect. How does that hit? How does that hit? Can we get the next slide, Heather? So let's look at, these are Judge Taney. And this is part of his strong feeling for why he said that. He said that for a century before, that they Black people had been regarded as beings of an inferior order and altogether unfit to associate with the white race. So in his discussion, he talks about an axiom. He said, there's no question. I'm not positing a theory that we have to research. This is a fact. We here in the United States at that time, in those colonies, we here, the white people, know this as a fact. The Black people are of an inferior order, you can't even fit to associate even socially or politically, so far inferior that they had no rights, which the white man was bound to respect. And that, listen to this, the Negro might justly and lawfully be reduced to slavery. What does that mean? He was bought and sold treated as an ordinary article of merchandise and traffic, wherever profit could be made by it. Wherever profit could be made. I can buy a pillow. I can sleep on this pillow. I can give it to somebody else. I can tear it up. This opinion was at the time fixed and universal in the civilized portion of the white race. So I'm saying all this, and the reason I'm taking the time to read this, I want you to get an idea of how strong this is. And it wasn't just that he came out of this 1857 declaration and writing of the Supreme Court. He said that for more than a century before, Black people it's an axiom. Black people are determined to be, it's clear, there's no question, an inferior order.
That ties into what I was saying previously. The idea of, people of European descent living in a position of political, economic, and cultural dominance over others. This is what it's saying a century before. It's referring to the times leading up to this point here in 1857, where this position, provided originally by circumstance that they'd been living in, becomes ingrained in them on a sociological level. And then, just like Diane said, it gets codified in law. And this is a perfect example of this in the United States. Once it becomes codified in law, it becomes even more reinforced in the zeitgeist of the time, and it becomes a strong, self-perpetuating cycle continuing into itself.
So we're taking so much time with this because we are making us aware of how strong this is. And we can say, oh, that happened in 1857. And so, we've changed. And I've looked and I've looked and I've looked and I've looked, and I don't find anywhere that on a level like the United States Supreme Court, the highest court in the land, where it was declared officially, no doubt about it, that Black people are of an inferior order. So then even when we go to the 13th Amendment to the Constitution, there's a Constitution, then there's an amendment, and it said Black people, the enslaved are now free. And that's what it said. But that's all it said. And so as I look down through the laws and I watch the culture, you see, we're also talking about, even during the 13th Amendment, we're talking about a time when, after slavery, the people of the country, not just the South, the people of the country developed Black codes codes of how you could treat Black people. Some were, if you breach these codes, if you're a Black man, that's why I did I want you to see how you feel when you're seeing a Black person, because now in the 19th century, we've got Black codes around 1890. This was 1857. So around 1890, we start to develop Black codes. And they said, for example, if you're a Black man and you're walking down the street, you better keep your eyes down. You better look at the street. And if a white person is coming toward you, now how do you act then? You get off the sidewalk. And at that time, then that meant out into the dirt. You move yourself out into the dirt and bow and scrape and let this white person go by, and by no means look up and see the face of a white woman. By no means. And that's important, because you see that's still going on, but for years and years, now we're talking thousands and thousands of known lynchings now a lynching where they would take and hang, but these lynchings, look back in our history, look back at it, don't shy away from it. See the bodies of Black people, men and women. One woman was hung upside down when she criticized the lynch mob for lynching her husband. They grabbed her, hung her upside down. She was pregnant, 8-9 months pregnant. They cut open her belly and poured her baby out onto the ground and crushed it with clubs. You can't avoid this. This is American history. No more of this Black history stuff. This is American history. And we must look at it. And why is that? It flows out of this idea that Black people are not human. 3/5 of a human in the Constitution of the United States, ingrained, 3/5 of a different order of being. So they lynching for thousands, and those are just the ones that we can identify. And all the way down, even when we go to the court and we look at Plessy versus Ferguson, a case that was, now we're 100 years or some years later, and we're looking at, can Black people sit in a public coach that contains white people? And so you see here that Plessy said, no, we're going to be separate. We're going to give them their own things to sit in. Because why is that? You look back at this Dred Scott decision, it says that unfit to associate with the white race in social situations. So we cannot just disregard or look over or say that's over. It's not over. So what I'm saying is that as I look through our history, I don't find nowhere where we've ever gone in and we've said, we're going to take apart this idea of inferiority. We haven't done that. And so what's stuck in our minds? And so not only do we have the inferiority, but we've got a big fear going on as well. And we're going to get a chance, hopefully. Yes, Heather, we're going to get a chance can we go to the next slide? This is it. We're talking about, can you talk just a few minutes, Farrell, so we can then go to the Kimberly Jones and go to the small groups? So yeah. Farrell, talk about why do the rumors of inferiority, do they persist into modern times? Why do we have anti-Black racism? Why?
So, like we said towards the beginning of this segment, we're going to particularly focus on anti-Black racism because sure, other kinds of racism exist and that matters. And it'll even be brought up specifically right now as it contrasts to this. Because, that's often a point that people bring up as a tactic of deflection, is drawing attention, especially to acts of bigotry shown against particularly European immigrants in the United States, because that exists. But an important part of why specifically anti-Black racism is still so paramount in the history of the United States and in modern American culture comes from a distinct lack of external pressure and opposition against it. So you have this can either be in the form of directly speaking out. A good example of that, I cannot for the life of me remember the specific date, but there were in the history of the United States lots of lynchings of Italian Americans. And I want to say the early 1900s, there was a very prominent Italian bishop that was greeted politically by the United States and spoke out against this mistreatment of Italian Americans, specifically drawing attention to these injustices that were brought against these American immigrants and humanizing them not only to a public, but also to the highest level of American authority. There are indirect examples of this, whether it could just be through economic importance of a nation of origin. This can be seen in examples of, in the terms of the modern era, recently modernized East Asian countries, such as China, Japan, and South Korea, and their importance to trade agreements and economic importance to the United States. So it's indirect reliance on these nations of origins that can apply pressure to the treatment of their immigrants in the United States. These are both examples of things that African Americans do not have. Because even if you want to point to examples of American interaction and reliance on African resources, which exists, it's something that, one, people might not know that much about. I would say the average American citizen has a rough idea of the amount of importance that the United States has, or the amount of reliance, I should say, the United States has on countries like China, and they don't know the amount of reliance the United States might have on something like oil imports from Nigeria. But even if they did, those countries don't necessarily speak out or speak up in regards to any of the injustices that have been had against people of distant African descent, though still undeniably traceable all the same in the United States. So without these forms of external pressure in terms of changing anything in the United States, because this is an incredibly common phrase and it always remains to be true and always will remain to be true, money talks. And even if you're a bigot, even if you hate Chinese people in your heart, you cannot deny the massive importance of relations between one nation and the other. So even if you are a horrid racist, that is something that will affect you regardless of what's in your heart. And African Americans never had something like that. So that's a really important factor as to why it continues to persist in the way it has, specifically with anti-Black racism in the United States.
Thank you, Farrell. We're going to wrap up this segment with an important video, and then you're going to go to your breakout group. So thank you for your attention. She explains it all. Thank you. And now go and talk in your breakout groups.